The Onimusha story is vast, spanning nearly 40 years of events from Warlords to Dawn of Dreams. That's not counting all that occurs before the games themselves, like the birth of the Genma and the Onin War. Unfortunately, such a widely spread story makes narrative inconsistencies near impossible to avoid, and as a result, Onimusha is no stranger to plot holes. However, there is one particular plot hole that has perhaps bothered me a bit more than it should, especially considering that it only exists due to a narrative inconsistency that honestly never needed to exist in the first place. That being the Genma's sudden immunity to human weaponry in Dawn of Dreams, or more specifically, immunity to attacks from regular humans, since a normal weapon in the hands of an Oni is still deadly to Genma. I can't really fathom why this plot point even exists, but as a result, the 5 main playable characters, Soki, Akane, Tenkai, Ohatsu, and Roberto, all require reasons as to why they are capable of fighting the Genma. For 3 of the main cast, finding a reason was quite simple. Tenkai, being an older Samanosuke, has been an Oni warrior for almost 40 years, so an explanation isn't really required. Akane is the granddaughter of Seki Shusai Yagyu, the Jubei from Onimusha 2, meaning she has Oni blood, so that gives her an easy pass. And Soki is the reincarnation of the Oni god of darkness, not only holding the blood of an Oni, but also being the most powerful Oni in existence. Another easy reason. Roberto's reasoning was a little more complicated, but it still somewhat works. Due to Luis Frois implanting the exercising beads into Roberto's body, the magic power that he gained means that he doesn't even require a weapon to kill Genma, choosing to fight practically unarmed and taking advantage of his immense physical strength. Ohatsu, however, is a bit of a strange case. She has no real direct relation to the Oni, and did not receive any sort of enhancement like Roberto, making her fully human. In-game, the reason given, which is only discovered through a missable conversation with her, is that she is the niece of the previous Genma Lord Nobunaga Oda, and as a result, she likely has at least partial Genma blood. Now, it doesn't take a genius to think about this for more than 5 seconds and realise that this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for a multitude of reasons. For starters, a child does not inherit traits from anyone other than their direct parents, those parents being Oichi and Nagamasa Asai. So unless either of them were Genma, she will not have inherited any Genma aspects. If Capcom really wanted to go down the route of keeping her Genma blood, they could have easily made her the daughter of Nobunaga rather than a niece, perhaps with Vega Donna being the mother. Nobunaga is known to have had many children, so perhaps Ohatsu could have been changed to Aihime, one of Nobunaga's daughters born in 1574, making her the same age as Hideyasu. Hell, her interactions with Soki wouldn't even need to change, aside from swapping her fiancé from Kyogoku Takatsugu to Maeda Toshinaga. The other issue with Ohatsu's explanation is that Nobunaga, up until 1560, was entirely human. And while she would have been born 10 years after he allied himself with the Genma, the rest of his relatives would still be purely human. Like I said, it doesn't take a genius to realise the issue here. Initially, at the end of my full timeline video, link in the description, I brought up the possibility that she had Genma blood due to the fact that she was infested with Genma insects, which is able to give an otherwise regular human enough power to kill Genma. And since she is never seen on screen before she was infected, they are what allowed her to fight them, with her ability to do so remaining after she was purified. This is, admittedly, a pretty far-fetched solution with a few issues of its own, but it at least makes a small bit of sense. After mulling this over for a little bit, however, something occurred to me that may well have turned my entire view on Ohatsu and her lineage upside down. Now, there's already a separate plot hole with her mother, Oichi, since during Samurai's Destiny, she explains her initial disillusion with Nagamasa to be because he already had 3 daughters from his past wife, those daughters clearly being Cha-Cha, Ohatsu, and Ogo, since Nagamasa never had any other children outside of a son named Mampuku Maru. However, those 3 daughters were actually Oichi's biological daughters, which is further confirmed when Ohatsu mentions that Cha-Cha bared an uncanny resemblance to her late mother. Basically, Oyu's backstory made no sense in regards to her daughters. Onimusha's soul does suggest that Nagamasa was actually an Oni warrior, but does anyone really take anything that game says seriously? What I want to focus on, however, is that Ohatsu's parents are supposed to be fully human, aren't they? Recently, I've begun to doubt that fact for a couple of reasons that go back to Samurai's Destiny. No, this isn't going to be me saying that one of her parents were actually somewhat related to the Genma. I stand by the impossibility of that idea. But there is a key plot point in that game that potentially calls Oichi's humanity into question. The main goal of Samurai's Destiny was to find and gather all 5 of the Oni's sacred orbs in order for Jubei to defeat Nobunaga. Orbs that were created eons ago by the Oni to protect humanity, with each representing one of the 5 most important aspects of a true Oni. Jubei's mother, Takajo, held the Charity Orb until she gave it to her son. Oichi held the Faith Orb, giving it to Jubei after he earned her trust. Juju Dorma was in possession of the Honesty Orb, which Jubei wrestled from her after finally telling her what everyone else was obviously too afraid to. Gugen Dontis held the Respect Orb, which he willingly gave to Jubei after the Oni had grown strong enough to defeat him in combat, clearly earning the swordsman's, well, respect. Finally, the Strength Orb was taken from Gingham Fats after Jubei found a way to destroy an otherwise immortal Genma. Now, it makes sense that Takajo was able to keep hold of the Charity Orb since she has essentially been in hiding until Jubei began his journey, while the Honesty, Respect and Strength Orbs were obviously taken by the Genma during the Onin War. That, however, leaves the Faith Orb, held by Oichi. She had absolutely no affiliation with the Genma, and was unaware of the Oni's existence until meeting Jubei, which begs the question, how did she get her hands on the orb? According to her own words, the orb had been passed down through her family for generations until she finally gave it to Jubei. Given how sacred the orbs are, why would her family be in possession of one? With very few exceptions, the Oni clan never really directly interacted with the humanity unless it was to make someone an Oni warrior, and they would likely only give one of their orbs to someone that they have complete faith in. My point is, if the orb has been passed down through generations of Oichi's family, then, potentially, not only could one of her ancestors have been an Oni, but that would also mean that Oichi, and by extension Ohatsu, would also hold Oni blood, making them both Oni as well. There's not really another reason that they would allow that orb to stay within her family for so long, so that feels like the logical conclusion. This, however, would also imply that Nobunaga also held Oni blood, which honestly would make for a fairly interesting twist. Bear in mind that he's the only Genma to this day that is capable of using multiple different elemental magic attacks akin to Oni magic, which he does in both his boss fight in Samurai's Destiny and his final fight with Onimusha Samanosuke in Demon Siege. I suppose one could argue that Fortinbras did utilise different elements in his fight at the end of Warlords, but aside from the lightning that he can summon from his fingertips, the wind is just the wind pressure from his swipe, and the fire is simply his breath, neither of which really count as magic. This is, of course, discounting the fact that, even if in a weakened state in Warlords, Fortinbras was still a literal god, which would kind of give him a pass regardless. One could even argue that the Genma generals in Dawn of Dreams use elemental magic, but none of them are capable of utilising more than one element each, with the colour of their armour indicating what element they can use. This would obviously mean that both Cha-Cha and Ogo are Onis as well, which I suppose could go at least part of the way to explaining why she was able to maintain some sort of consciousness after already becoming the Genma Mother Tree, something that Ophelia absolutely didn't see coming, especially given that Cha-Cha demonstrated this free will by immediately killing her as soon as she woke up. Even more interestingly, this would also mean that Hideyori, the son of Hideyoshi, would also have Oni blood, which again would make for an interesting story, especially since it could turn the lore on its head a bit by making a Toyotomi the protagonist based on his short history. As it turns out, Hideyori was actually an opponent of Ieyasu Tokugawa, after the latter initially seized power 2 years following Hideyoshi's death in 1598, after winning the Battle of Sekigahara in the year 1600. He spent his childhood practicing calligraphy and wishing for peace. In 1614, Hideyori was a daimyo living in Osaka Castle, and many samurai rallied behind him, declaring him the rightful ruler over Ieyasu. Tokugawa deemed him a threat to his rule and commenced the Winter Siege of Osaka, an attack that ultimately failed, though Hideyori was still persuaded to sign a truce that forced him to dismantle the stronghold defences of the castle. In 1615, after catching wind that Hideyori was mustering more forces and attempting to stop the moat around the castle from being filled, Ieyasu broke the truce and launched the Summer Siege of Osaka in June, slowly defeating Toyotomi's forces. Hideyori tried to sail towards the enemy with a smaller army, but arrived too late and was pushed back to the castle. Unable to set up defences in time, the castle was set ablaze with artillery fire, and Hideyori, alongside his mother Yodo Dono, committed seppuku. Now, ignoring the fact that these history lessons are beginning to become a bit of a common occurrence in these Onimusha videos, this one theory would not only potentially open up 1 or 2 more interesting takes on Onimusha, but this particular scenario would also give more of a spotlight to Ieyasu Tokugawa, someone who's never been shown in any capacity in the entire series despite his multiple references. Whether or not Ieyasu would make a genuine attempt to utilise the Genma for his rise to power could be called into question, however, either due to his opposition to the Toyotomi clan who's used them previously, the fact that the Genma may well be almost completely destroyed after Fortinbras' ultimate demise in Dawn of Dreams, or simply because he witnessed them fail multiple times and began to wonder whether or not they would be reliable. But I'm beginning to go a bit too far on a tangent here, so let's stop here. Case in point, given Oyu's possession of the Oni Faith Orb, it's possible that the Oda family could well be descendants of the Oni clan, and if so, it could open up a fair few possibilities, both to expand on already existing characters, and to allow for newer characters like Hideyori to have their own stories. What do you think? Is this a possibility to you? Or perhaps you have another explanation? Or even a completely different theory on something else altogether? Tell me what theories you might have, and I'll see what I can find. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care everyone. Danish out.